It's episode 123 of Off Script with Trish Close, intimate interviews with interesting people. Joining me today via Zoom, we're shaking things up a little bit right now, Lynette Marrero. She is an award-winning bartender, mixologist, and philanthropist, along with a lot of other things. Hi, Lynette. How are you today?
I'm great, spending a lot of time at home, getting a lot of projects done.
Good. That's good. I want to say you're my first mixologist on this podcast.
Oh, nice. Excellent.
And I'm not going to mince words. You're kind of a badass mixologist.
I just am someone who loves my job. So I guess if that shows off in, badassery, then yes.
Yes. Okay. Well, before we really get into it, I just want to let everybody know who's listening. This is how awesome you are. You've been honored by the James Beard Award as one of America's leading female mixologists in 2009. Why do we gotta say female? Can't you just be a mixologist? You know what I mean?
And we'll talk about it, but in 2009, It was a very different time.
Okay, you're right. You're right. Also named Food and Wine and Fortune magazine's most innovative women in food and drink in 2015 and Wine Enthusiast Mixologist of the Year in 2016. And a lot of people may have seen you on the ads that pop up on social media for the MasterClass. I know they pop up on my feed occasionally because I tend to be a little bit of a booze hound. So you pop up a lot there, which is really how I discovered you. And then I did some research and I just needed to know more. We're going to talk about a lot of things, including the MasterClass and how that started and this being a female mixologist in a male-dominated industry. But let's start from the beginning. Where are you from originally?
So I am Nuyorican, so that is someone of Puerto Rican heritage, born in New York. We have our own style. There's definitely, a different cultural influence about New York. I think that is really the starting point of where my love of food and drink comes from. My mom was cooking all the time, flavor building from a young age. I think just by the way the food has so much seasoning. And so I think my palate was developed quite young. And that's kind of what brought me to this. So really just knowing how much I loved putting things together really brought me into the cocktail world. So it's kind of I don't think not many people, I think now there's definitely more people who know they're going to go in a culinary track in their lives. And now the elevating like that you can go into the drinks world. But I don't think it was really like a career, right? You were always, I'm going to be a bartender because I'm going to do something else. And so it's great to see where the craft has elevated because there is such a breadth of different careers within just the cocktail and drinks world, which has expanded now to everything from, non-alc cocktails to other kinds of products. The beverage space is so vast and growing. So I'm really fortunate to be in this awesome time and place.
I'm glad you brought that up. I actually had that question on here, how it evolved. But I do want to go back to your mom. You were born and raised in New York City?
Yeah.
Okay. And so was she, obviously, I come from a family where the kitchen was the center. Was that for you guys? Food?
Yeah, I remember, some of my earliest memories was my mom walking us down Fifth Avenue in Brooklyn and things like, the barrels of pickles in the kosher delis or, New York is such a melting pot and there's so much cultural sharing. In our neighborhood, it was Irish, Italians, Jewish, Puerto Rican families. So you really kind of got this cultural sharing. But the kitchen always was the center place. It is the place where, we as a family would sit down, we would taste things, you'd have to eat your food for sure. There was no being picky or finicky. It was like, here's what's on the menu. Mom is not tailoring it for everyone. And then in summers, we would go to Puerto Rico and I would then spend time with my grandparents. And so that's where I would get tropical fruits, that were growing on their property and just more exploration of the cultural flavors. So I think that just kind of really developed my palate. And then, we moved to the suburbs and then I ran back to New York as quickly as possible because obviously to your point, raising 4 daughters in New York City gets pretty challenging for parents.
Whoa.
And we need a bigger table and a bigger kitchen. So
4 girls. Oh, your poor mama. Oh my goodness.
Oh yeah, my parents my dad was outnumbered even with the dogs, and so it was
The best.
I exactly. I just grew up with a lot of strong female presence in my life, but
Yeah. Well, you also grew up in that environment. Different was normal,
Mhm.
right? Things that were different from you and your family with, the Jewish community and all the different
Oh
cultures
yeah.
and different colors. I mean, you grew up with diversity, which a lot of people say we can't say that.
Well, no, it's true. I think what's interesting about I think why I love New York so much is because, it retains so many waves of people coming to America, the port of entry. And
Hmm.
so, New York has those neighborhoods where you really can go and experience, one of my favorite places, which I go back all the time, is there's a whole section on Lexington Avenue in the 20s. That is where you can find all of your Pakistani ingredients, Middle Eastern ingredients. There's just these shops where I'm exposed to spices, flavors, and I have access to it. So that access to just the different flavors really, I think, also helps again with being inspired for drink making. Like every bartender or chef goes to like this one place called Calustian's because it's like floors and floors of every single crazy thing you can imagine, and even some molecular things you need, like tartaric acid or
Right.
things like that. So there's just, but you can find, you're like, oh yeah, I can find 3 different types of cardamom. I don't need to just find one. And that's, I think, opening up your self to a range of flavors, and that is a pretty wonderful part of being lucky enough to grow up here.
Right. Did you go to high school in the burbs or in the city?
Oh no, we went to the burbs. It was the burbs and Catholic schools. My dad was definitely on a track. He's like, all right, 4 daughters, here we go. Whatever control I can make. But I came back to New York and attended Columbia University. So I was living up in, the North Harlem area, I guess, or South Soha is what we were calling it then, South Harlem. And then, we'd have access to North and South. So again, you could just hop on
Yeah.
the one train from school and be in whatever neighborhood you need to be. So pretty accessible. But that again was just kind of a great opportunity to have just so many people coming from so many places. And university for me was a place, I really love studying. And I actually studied psychology there and also acting. So I kind of had this like very interesting degree, and all things that I think have actually, really helped in my career and things that are really useful. I think understanding people and how they think and hospitality is really important, and how you react within those spaces. So I think I rely on a lot of the training that I had from college, and I just loved it. For me, there was something so beautiful about being again in a place that is surrounded by so many diverse cultures. I wasn't quite ready to go to and like NYU was on my list, but I was like, you know what? It's too much in the middle of everything I wanted, campus and college, and have that kind of best of both worlds. So I was really happy to kind of have Columbia as that place of growth, and
Right.
I never went home. I was like, I was there. I would stay through the summers. I would work and, take extra classes and work on my craft at the time and audition and do everything that, I was like, I'm going to rough it out. And summers were hard in New York, but you've kind of, it was a lot of building blocks of, and that's what kind of got me into hospitality careers. You would be there in the summer. I'm like, all right, well, what am I going to work in? So I'd work in, retail sales at the musicals, like the theaters in Broadway. And I would meet then a bunch of other people who from so many different backgrounds. So there was just a lot of meeting and soaking in all of the things that I could.
Well, you hear that too when, especially whether it's, the wine field or mixologist, when you get that job in the restaurant and you start to really experiment with hospitality and drink make, you get hooked if that's what you're meant to do, right? It's like the bug bites you and you're thinking to yourself, you keep going back and looking for jobs like that. Did that happen for you?
Yeah, I mean, I think what happened was, I really tried not to be the cliche waiter actor. Like to me, I was like, don't do that. So I found hospitality in other places, so working a lot of the theaters that I worked for were Disney theatrical. I even actually got a gig as Julie Taymor's assistant when she was doing the workshop for The Lion King. So everything that Disney was teaching me was hospitality.
Sure.
Like that is their, whatever they're doing, hospitality is a part of it and a part of their culture. And then it was so easy to translate that when I finally did decide that I was going to, much my first job was at a wine bar with a global wine list, which I loved. Again, it was just something that I was learning so much. And, I just took a lot of those same principles. And like, you just translate that skill set. And I think that's important right now too, because I think, right now with where hospitality is and with everything that's going on, there are all going to be a lot of people who have been, investing careers in hospitality and food and beverage who may choose to go to a different career, and knowing that they have built a bunch of skill sets that translate to other fields. I think that's kind of like, that to me is a great thing to look at and see, is that these skills can be transferred to other places. It'll be a comeback time. And I think, with the restaurants, some restaurants and bars closing, there might be less opportunity. So, we have to bring all of these people into other parts of, the economic system. And that will be like, hey, you have skill sets, to do a lot of things, not just building drinks and, cooking in a kitchen, teach you a lot of things about team building. Front of house, you're learning a lot about sales. So I've seen quite a few people transition during this time or take extra classes just for other things to supplement their income. And I'm like, they're going to be super successful because they learned so much on the job.
Absolutely. And even psychology and acting, I feel like that really did set you up for what you're doing now, right?
It did. It totally did. I mean, like I said, people in hospitality, there's so many different reasons why people go out and enjoy a meal and enjoy a moment. And there's kind of a bit of, finding social cues when you're working, to give that experience. Some guests want to sit at your bar and want to learn everything about your back bar. And that is their sense of community, especially like in New York, where people are in small places and restaurants and bars are a place for them to have community. So being sensitive to that and knowing who the people are that need a little more engagement. And then there's, taking the social cues of the people who want to come in, kind of have their time, do their crossword and not be bothered. So you're constantly picking up the clues and understanding what, giving and taking with what's going on from your guests. And that I love that. I love when you get to forge those relationships and be able to just be that person for somebody. I think that's why New York's hospitality has such a community, because we are people coming from all these small places thrown together in this, in this city, and it's community. I really do feel that bars and restaurants become communities.
I agree. And one of my favorite places is bellying up to the bar and watching the bartender. That's theater in a sense.
Totally. It's like you watch the process, you see the organization.
Yes.
And those are also some skill sets, right? So you're learning so many things about mise en place, where things go, how to be organized, probably so many different things you can learn about putting things in their proper place.
I know.
So
those childhood lessons.
And that's a big skill set.
Yeah.
They are.
Right.
And also, by the way, quick math too, because you sit there and have, you're like, oh, I'm making multiples of drinks. I have my jigger, and you're just like adding up ounces, and you learn very quick math and multiples and go
perfect
on a quick basis. But there's also strong communication skill sets. You have a team, between bartenders and the barbacks and servers. There's lots of nonverbal communication that happens. So again, to your point, lots of understanding clues from other people, seeing what's going on, observing, and then being able to pivot and interact your pace or what you need to do to kind of help the team is something else that comes up.
And again, it's I'm the nerd who's going, wait, what did you just put into that drink? Because it's a little education for me too, just as a person who likes to make cocktails at home. I'm learning too when I just go out and have a drink at the bar, which I so badly miss. I miss that so much.
I know. I miss kind of the direct feedback, right? Yeah. So like, here's the part of it that's, you're presenting your art to somebody, and you're getting instant feedback. And that feeling of like gratification when you make that drink for somebody, especially when they're like, I'm not sure what I want, but these are sorts of flavors I really enjoy, and you dial it in and you present them something that you just created. And that moment is just kind of I do miss that point of contact.
Yeah.
We're trying as much as we can virtually, but it doesn't replace human contact, but we're doing the best we can.
Absolutely. It's a hair flip moment, isn't it? When you're just like, oh, you don't like whiskey and I just made you a drink that you love. Go me.
100%. That
right?
is totally it. And that's the thing, right? So there's always that learning to build trust, saying, hey, I'm going to try and make you something, if you don't like it. And there's a little bit of like investigative journalism too, a little bit when you're talking to a guest, because you're like trying to read between the lines of why they don't like something.
Right.
Because they'll say they don't like something. And oftentimes that's either tied to like a bad experience, an unbalanced drink, or actually something else that was completely in there that didn't even relate to that base spirit. Like it may not be that they don't like bourbon drinks. They might just not want just an old fashioned, which is really boozy. They might want to mix whiskey in different ways. And you have to kind of pick a little bit and find out, and then you go ahead and take those clues and hopefully are successful.
Yeah, that's amazing. Was there a point in your path where all of this started for you? I wrote down New York City's Flatiron Lounge, but was that the point for you where it started?
That was the place where I knew I was going to take this and build a deeper career. I had worked, my first job was at a wine bar on Clinton Street called Punch and Judy. And it was after 9/11. I had previously been temping in offices, decided I was never going to work in an office again. And I'm like, all right, well, I'm going to have to figure out this waiter thing and let's try it out. I ended up working there. And like I said, it was a global wine list. There was some, it just really intrigued me. There was just so much to learn, especially, just even learning about just starting with Italian wine. I was like, there's so much to learn about the way they call the grapes. And so I was immediately intrigued and knew that there was lots of continued learning to have. And I was really lucky in that place to, meet people who would become friends in this industry for a very long time and in their ventures in hospitality. And so that was great. And then I started working at a place crosstown from Flatiron called Sabar, which was kind of like, this very much martini lounge at the time. And it was a pretty busy bar, and just didn't even realize naturally they had a lot of women working there. And there was one guy, and he was the nephew of the general manager. And so he was there. Poor Dane had all these strong women like bartending around him and doing everything, and he could handle it. He was definitely not intimidating. He was just chilling because his mom comes from a big family and with lots of strong women. So we were, that's where I found kind of some camaraderie with women in the industry, who were willing to invest in each other and say, hey, you're a server, but do you want to start picking up some bartending? So one of the bartenders there, Amber, would start teaching me after our shift on Thursday, and then we'd go for a nightcap at the newly opened Flatiron Lounge. And that was kind of our process. And that's where I met Julie Reiner and her wife, Susan, and Michelle Connolly, who were the three women who were running the place. And it was just kind of incredible. And it was just really a beautiful space, lots of things that were just so intriguing. The flavors, the freshness of the juices. And I just kind of fell in love with it from a culinary standpoint, and then kind of stalked it for a year till I got a job there. So I was like applying. A year later, I got a job there. And then that was where I just had an opportunity to hone my craft, start learning. And the process there that I kind of really attribute to why it was so great was that, again, I had an opportunity to learn because they would do a flight of the day. And the flight of the day would be, either 3 classic cocktails or 3 cocktails with a theme. And so what I learned, obviously, in sales and hospitality was like, know as much about all those things if I'm going to authentically offer them to my guests.
Sure.
So I would ask all the questions. What's in this drink? Why are we, and I would just ask the deeper questions and write down the specs for them. Just like, well, I want to know. And that kind of what I realized after, working there for a bit was that I started understanding, I was learning the bartending. I was learning the drinks. So when there were shifts where it was just one server and a bartender, I'd be able to hop back and help. And then, I had some advocates on the team that were like, Lynette needs to be trained to be a bartender. So they did. And so I just kind of jumped in, and then my career kind of took off in this industry. I was constantly balancing it for a few years of traveling and doing shows and coming back to hospitality. And then I, made the choice. I was like, I really want to invest in this career, and I want to do events in the spirits world. I thought at that time, especially, that the cocktails you'd get, because all my friends were starting to get married, all the cocktails you'd get at the weddings were awful. And you're like, well, what? I work at a good bar, so why can't I get a good cocktail at a wedding? So I started a small cocktail catering company. And then that kind of led me to starting to help different brands launch and run their events and have better cocktails at those kind of engagements.
It feels like, just reading about you, that happened really fast. Do you feel that way?
Pretty quick.
Okay.
Yeah, for sure. I had an opportunity because Flatiron Lounge was part of that early core of really, important cocktail bars coming back to New York. Milk and Honey was one, but Milk and Honey was a speakeasy, so it could only have, maybe 20 people at a time, but Flatiron was jam-packed, and it was bringing this culture of craft cocktails to a lot of people. And so they needed more staff. And so training up and getting the opportunities there just was more opportunity. So I was able to kind of pick up and learn, and then start picking up jobs at restaurant bars who also wanted to have good cocktail programs. So I was really fortunate to be able to build my resume pretty quickly.
Yeah.
And jump into them even consulting. Like that happened within 3 years of me really starting to pick up the stick. And that's a pretty fast trajectory.
What do you think it is about you specifically that happened? Was it your talent? Was it your tenacity? Was it all of these things that you brought to the table? Because I do think there was a point, and I wanted to ask you about this, where bartenders went from bartenders to being mixologists, where there's a science behind it. You're not just slinging booze behind the bar. You're actually, there's thought and purpose in what you're doing. So what was it about you, do you think, that propelled you on this path?
I stayed open, and I really observed a lot. I also came with a skill set of understanding being accountable and taking opportunities. I wasn't the bartender who would, work till 4 a.m., sleep till noon, miss like all these opportunities. I was a go-getter. I was up early.
You weren't complacent.
I may be tired. No.
Yeah, you weren't complacent.
Tired. I'll get up. I'll check my emails. I'll respond back. If I need to take a nap later, I will. So, and also just the need to keep experiencing, wanting to just, I didn't want to just work and have it just be a job. I'm like, well, what else can I learn from this? Well, how else can this help me just keep moving forward in life? And that's just kind of a personality trait that I have. And I think I always said that it's like opportunity presented itself to me because literally, I was just waking up. If I just woke up earlier than every other bartender, when someone's emailing, looking for someone to do an article, can you contribute to an article? Can you do this or that? I jumped at those opportunities very quickly.
I interviewed someone, she's actually a free diving, spear fishing woman, one of a few in the entire world. Right. But she was telling me when she started to get into that, she was sitting back and sort of watching these things happen to other people. And she was saying to herself, why aren't these things coming to me? And she goes, you know what? I have to go get them. They're not going to just fall in my lap. You actually have to get up early and not sleep in and check your emails. You have to do the work, right? I mean, if you want to be successful.
Absolutely. And I think, I was lucky that it was a time where, we were just taken seriously, and I think, I think this, we had to kind of adapt the mixologist word, even though most of us are like, we're just bartenders. We'll take them. We understand why we have to distinguish it because other people, it gives them context. But, there are good drink makers out there who are just mixologists, but having the complete picture of being able to actually engage and do, teach people on the job, train, other bartenders to be able to, one, just do what you said, like that beauty and the magic of when it happens in the moment.
Yeah.
You have to be a bartender first, and then you can take it and go out there and put together on paper, for mentorship purposes, I really believe, how it happens and let other people come together. But there are some people who are really talented. They know how to bartend and put together, but they're not great drink makers. They're not great at coming up with the concept. And those people have an amazing space. They're the people who will follow the recipe and do it, but they have personalities that are so engaging. And a lot of the people that I've seen now in that that way have found the other things that make them passionate, whether it's about, starting other initiatives within hospitality while bartending that are helping the industry. Whether it's starting mental health and wellness, classes and all these things. Some people have both and are using both kind of skill sets, but it's just interesting to see where people go, or some of those people became business owners. And they're like, I was an okay bartender, but I love this industry. So I'm going to start, I'm going to have a business and I'm going to hire talented people.
Right.
So I think it's kind of like what I said earlier. There's so many different pathways in this industry, but I think that term mixologist, what it did help was give the broader, consumer an understanding of how to understand that the industry had elevated.
Yeah, I was going to say that.
Yeah, so I think, and that's sometimes, we saw the chefs kind of get there, and so it's kind of, we kind of, you'd go to all these events with, celebrity chefs, and they'd start doing these events, and then they'd have bars there, and there'd be bartenders, and we just had to kind of, give it adopt a name that's a very old name actually, and bring it back and embrace it as, okay, people who are taking this path are saying we're doing this as our life career. And then you see where people have gone off, like with that skill set. Some people are, corporate mixologists for big distributors, and they were people who were really good drink makers, and you take a bunch of ingredients, be like, all right, here's what you got, make a cocktail. And so those people have flourished in those places. So lots of different pathways, lots of different, people have different goals and paths in this industry. And I think that's why it's so engaging, because you can go so many different ways.
I know when it changed for me when it comes to especially cocktails, good craft cocktails, the margarita and wanting lime juice instead of sweet and sour mix. Was there a point, do you think, I know there was a point, but looking back, can you go, yep, that's when it all changed, where especially the consumer was demanding just higher quality in their cocktails?
Yeah, I think it started once you saw restaurants adapting this principle as much, because then there was a broader breadth of, just people to market to. So you had, it's really like when you look at national accounts or really big businesses that have multiple chains, and they've started to adapt some fresh juice. Now, we're moving forward. But I think it was those bars like Flatiron, and then some of the restaurants that you saw, and then you saw kind of going in waves all over the country.
Right.
These bars were popping up, and guests were getting exposed in these cocktail bars, and then they'd go to their restaurants and be like, why is my drink not as good as when I get at this bar, and I'd like to have a cocktail before dinner that is made really well and has fresh juice. And so you saw the overall industry having to adapt to the craft cocktail bar. And I'm very happy to say that it's really hard to walk into a place that is doing high, really good food and beverage without seeing their cocktail list. Yeah. So it's great that happened. And I think, social media really helped. So I think if I really kind of pin it, started like Twitter was a big place where a lot of articles are being shared, and then you'd have like message boards, and consumers would start getting involved. But social media was an opportunity to kind of give it light out in the world, and people could see cocktails and share recipes. And that started, I think making it so it's like, it's not that hard. Do you have a lime at home? You can buy a lime in a store. Really just squeeze it into your glass. It's going to be 110 times better. So I think that's kind of, I do think social media allowed it, and it also allowed us as a community to expand our connections globally. So that's where, really was able to meet bartenders from all over the world and strengthen our community to this point. So I think that's kind of also something that comes into play.
This is so cheesy, but my husband and I used to watch, we were addicted to Bar Rescue.
Yeah.
Do you remember that show with John Tapper?
Oh, I do. I do remember it.
But that did,
like,
well, it's education. It was education for us.
Yes, education. And there's some of the mentors on there are really good friends of mine, and I've known them for a long time, and they do a great job. I just didn't respond well to the negativity because I'm really positive. So
same.
I'm like, do we really need, this Gordon Ramsay style ranting? And I know that was kind of the time. And so it was about, and a lot of the stuff that we did with Speedrock was about being counter to that image,
Yeah.
like you can get a lot done by being positive with people rather than being negative. So, but it did serve a need, and it was hard too. I think that was one of the few shows on television that did talk about cocktails.
Yeah.
And that's been a long battle, or a long, journey with cocktails in general, because for a long time, TV was very afraid to put alcohol on TV. They're like, oh, I don't know about this thing. And you're like, it's just cooking with liquid. So let's just get to that point. And, so we've been fighting, we fought a long battle. So it was one of the few things that got airtime. But I'm optimistic and positive that, the next round of things that will come up in those spaces will be more along the variety that you see on Food Network, where there could be so many different ways of looking at beverage rather than just one approach.
Fantastic. Yeah, I always thought that, like, why so aggressive? Why are you shouting?
Yeah.
Like, just
ratings.
Yeah, exactly. Oh yes, I know. I'm all very, very familiar with ratings. So in the meantime, you're just kicking ass left and right. Let's talk about Speed Rack. How did this start? I think this is so freaking cool.
So it started by kind of, I obviously raised with, in a house with 4 girls. So female companionship in my life was very important. And that kind of ended up being a theme throughout other than my first job at the wine bar, where I was like the only woman. Every other space I entered, and probably because I was reaching out to those spaces, there was, a female camaraderie. So I'd have either, someone or a couple people that I would really, want to build a community with. And that, started Julie Reiner, and then having mentors and so really looking for that mentorship. And so I decided I guess it was like 2009, I started a group in New York called LUPEC, which is Ladies United for the Preservation of Endangered Cocktails. And they had started in 2001. It was a group of feminists in Pittsburgh who wanted to basically talk about, feminist agenda, but they wanted to do it with classic cocktails. And the only places where they were that made those drinks still were like the dirty old man bars, like the ones where with like the at that point, probably 50-year-old bartender who remembers actually making those drinks.
It was called the branding iron, probably.
Totally, something like that. So they would go into those spaces and do that. And then that kind of inspired groups all over the country. And I met the group in Boston who it ended up being a bunch of women who were working in hospitality. And so they kind of turned it towards more of like a hospitality group. And it was great. And they were doing events in Boston that would raise money for local women's-based charities. And so I was inspired by that. They put out a cocktail book that I saw at an event called Tales of the Cocktail. And I was like, this is great. This is such a great way to bring your community together, and then also do other things that I'm really passionate about, which is, community service and helping others. So I was like, well, I can do this in New York. Why don't I just start a group, and it'll help me bring the women that are not directly working with in all these other different bars together to basically take over spaces that are predominantly male, and then do these events that will raise money for women's based charities. So we did that, and that started a recruitment process of, every time I would go into a bar and meet, a talented woman working hospitality who I didn't know, I'd start inviting them to be a part of the group. Like, are you looking for a community? Why don't you come join this? And so one of them was my partner, Ivy Mix, who I met her, funnily enough, I met her when an old colleague from Flatiron Lounge asked me, like, he had triplets who worked at his space, and they were the other servers. And besides this one woman, Ivy. And so, but they all had a wedding or something to go to. So like the triplets are gone. So his staff of like fill-ins was depleted. So he asked me to fill in. I was like, yeah, no problem. I'm not doing that anymore, but sure, I'll fill in and help. And Ivy was the other bartender, the other server working, and she really wanted to break into New York craft bartending. And so I invited her to be a part of the group. And that led to, down the line, she and I, were working together at a big festival, and the festival was completely being run by women bartenders. We were all literally in the kitchen at this festival, and it was a bunch of LUPEC chapters from all over the country. We invited the women to come in and do all the prepping, batching, measuring out, making sure all the cocktails got to the seminars. In exchange for that work, they got free passes to everything. So it was kind of this internship exchange that my friend Don Lee was like, do you want to bring the LUPEC women? Let's give them an opportunity to kind of learn those skills, which is a big part of if you're going to do events, et cetera. And she was outside in a break with our friend Rachel Shaw, and this film crew came up and was like, hey, we're doing this little feature thing and we don't know any women bartenders. We can't find any. And she was sort of thinking to herself, well, they're all like actually making this entire festival happening. So they filmed her, and she's like, well, they didn't know who I was. It was just super weird. And I was just going to been like a faceless woman. I was just the woman bartender for that moment. And so, she came back, she's like, what else can we do that's more meaningful and on a bigger scale to keep promoting that there are lots of women in this industry. They're just not being showcased, and there's just no opportunity. So, she kind of was like, oh, we should do something called Speed Rack, and let's, and the LUPEC model, let's, raise money for breast cancer research. And I was like, yeah, that sounds great. So we put together, just because I do love those TV shows. So something that was kind of like our version of like a Chopped meets, competition show on stage, crazy fast bartending, 4 drink rounds, but based on classic cocktails. Because I think, education is the most important part of advancement. And so at that time, we were really lucky in New York and certain centers like San Francisco. If you were in the big cities, you had opportunity to learn a lot more from mentors who were there, people who were writing the books. In New York, it was everyone who wrote a cocktail book was living there, coming into your bar. So we were trying to get more of that education out there for more women bartenders across the country. And so we did. We started doing these events that were kind of like a roller derby meets cocktails. It's fast paced, crazy. And we would bring these mentors to these women as judges. And so you would get firsthand critique from these legendary people that you're reading about in books. And that became the platform. And we ended up expanding that globally. We've raised over $1 million for really wonderful charities that we've highly vetted, that are doing the right kinds of things and believe in our same core values of women supporting other women and advancement and making sure that no one's being left behind in the conversation. And we've it's just been insane. It's been great. Obviously this year we are grounded from doing events, but we've been doing some things. The Speed Rack Academy, we've been doing some kind of online cocktail classes with our competitors to give them access and opportunity to practice those skill sets, which are really important right now. We're launching a mentorship program in the next 2 months. That is going to be a global mentorship program. We have over 80, we have over 150, I believe, applications, but we have over 80 mentors who are from the community. So that way we can keep that bond of, and they're from all over the industry, from everything from social media experts to PR, to brand people. So that way we're trying to just kind of broaden that sisterhood, and that mentorship and that community. So if we can't do it in person, we'll do it virtually and kind of hopefully develop something meaningful that comes out of all this that can continue. So it's and then we'll get back to events and finish season 9, where we have 2 events left for season 9, and so one is a Mid-Atlantic regional, and then our national finals. So we're going to figure out how we can get our Mid-Atlantic competitors, and then we're going to really push this year to do some sort of safe event where we can probably more focus on streaming it rather than having our awesome crowds that come and enjoy and cheer on the competitors and help us raise a lot of money.
I was just going to say, I want to go. So let's get this rolling, because I want to go. They just look so fun and so lively and energetic and positive.
Well, that's the thing. We found a way to say, hey, look at us. We're here in a way that brought everyone as a community to want to support and raise up the women. So, we would get the male bartenders who were famous in their communities would take a step back to push forward the women working in their bar, and you would see that kind of nurturing, and it was great because it was Yeah, it does that. It's like we all have to help each other. We have to all push and raise if we're going to actually have diversity that is long lasting. Everyone has to be invested in it. And it became, a great, we became a recruiting ground. People would go and be like, I need more bartenders. And this event has so many talented people we would never meet if we didn't do it. So it has really become a big community. So we're excited to get back to it.
And there's just something sexy about a female bartender, right?
I was talking about there's fluidity. There's a lot of, I think it's funny. I think a lot of the bartenders who I know, some of them were former dancers. So like whenever someone has a dance background, you're kind of seeing this beautiful arc, male or female. I'm like, there's just also a grace to bartending.
That's what it is.
Pretty grace. And when someone doesn't have, if they're not super burly, there's going to be a different way of achieving shaking a drink, I always thought of it as choreography because everything has to be planned out. So, and I think what Speed Rack has taught our bartenders, which I think a lot of the guys started paying attention to, is how they would set up their well, because they were working to shave off seconds. And so, these women started, teaching in their bar how to set up for a Speed Rack bar for everyone. So it became a lesson for everyone in the bar of how to be efficient and make really good drinks and come out. And, I think our bars and restaurants, like I said earlier, they're communities. So they need to reflect the community at large. And I think that's where we're having this big conversation about diversity and inclusion. And I think especially in hospitality, because it's a welcoming space for everyone. And so your teams and your, staff should reflect that and have that feeling that everyone feels welcome. And I think you start by who you hire and how you train everyone and the pathways you create for everyone to advance.
Alcohol brings us all together. One big happy family. I want to, you're actually going to, I think, make us a cocktail. But before we get there, because I do want to ask you the common mistake people make at home when they're making cocktails. But before that, let's go into MasterClass, which we talked about right at the beginning of this. Did they contact you?
They did. So I came back from a trip to Israel with this really amazing hospitality. Well, they're a really cool organization, but the trip I specifically almost for people called Taste. And so anyone across the entire field of hospitality, food and beverage, and came back and I had this, email in my LinkedIn or connection in my LinkedIn. And I was like, I don't know what this is, but okay, is this legit? Here's my email. Let's talk. And I did. I actually, started then researching the group, and, I saw their culinary classes and a lot of people that I really love watching because I actually really love to cook. And so it became this really great process of, that they wanted to do a mixology class. I was one of the two bartenders. Ryan Chetiwardana is the other bartender on there, and he is a delight. And we knew each other, but never worked together. He had judged Speed Rack before, and so it was great. But we were kind of originally doing two very different classes. I was like, all right, well, we'd sit with the creative director and we'd talk to you like, well, what do you want to teach? I'm like, well, if this is the first class, there's so much to teach. Where do we start? Because we have to start with all the building blocks that I started with, because you can't start, if I just go out there and be like, you can't go ahead and do a bread making class if you don't know how to bake like a muffin, like you have to kind of start with, I know, okay, I got it. Wet ingredients, dry ingredients, muffin. You'll move on to how starting your own sourdough and all of that. But let's start with this, like the simpler things, right? That are more forgiving. And so I took that approach to cocktails. I'm like, well, there's just so much basic information that needs to happen. So my class was definitely geared towards the trajectory was learn the basic principles of building blocks of drinks, because that is the biggest part of success. And Ryan was going to be a little more, like what he does, which is kind of more slightly molecular, but we both come from a love of food and foodie background. His mother was a chef and also is part of it. Like he's in business with his family. And so when we realized at the end of the day that we were both coming from the same place of like loving food and that inspiring our journeys into cocktails, we just did one day on the set, and they're like, well, you're going to mix your classes because we're just going to show very quickly like how you can go from here to here. And they created a really cool storyline, and I love that they were so fluid with everything. And it was probably one of the best professional experiences. They really listened to what we wanted to put in the drinks. There wasn't a lot of, overbearing of like, no, if you do not make, the one drink that everyone wants to make, then, we're not going to do it. So there was no like, here's the top 5 trending cocktails, we need you to make it. Just so happened we touched on those things because those are the gateway and entry points for people. I thought when Ryan chose to do a Cosmo, I was like, all right, Ryan's going to do a Cosmo. Way to go. But he's going to do it in a way that you've never experienced it. So it was a very wonderful creative experience. And then, obviously our class, in beta testing did really well. And then we launched March 5th, 2020.
Yeah.
So we were supposed to launch later in March, but already like the desire, like who they beta test with, they're like, okay, people want this class. So we got pushed up a few weeks early, which happened to be really perfect timing because we launched before everything got really insane. And then people were finding us because we weren't, I think if we would have launched on our actual launch date, which I think was the day like they started evacuating New York, basically, it would have been a weird time. But we launched at a time that was good. And then I've really made so many connections during quarantine, actually, through MasterClass, whether people are tagging me and their cocktails they're making at home and on social or reaching out for little questions, book recommendations. And so it's been a really great opportunity to be able to keep connecting. And that's been so satisfy that need to, one, educate and be a part of it. But it's been very, very positive, and the community is fantastic. And, I keep seeing how many amazing instructors they bring on, and I keep pinching myself like, wait, I'm on the same platform as Issa Rae? What?
That gave me butterflies a little bit, just looking in your email and seeing something like that. That's amazing. That's just very, very cool. And that's how I discovered you, honestly, was through MasterClass. So I'm sure a lot of people are learning about you. And if anyone is looking to find your class, I literally Googled your name, Lynnette Marrero, and MasterClass, and boom, there you are. So, I mean,
it comes up
easy to find.
It is. It was pretty great. And it became a really great opportunity for me during this time. Like I have done more classes than I thought I ever would. And kind of when you go back to like the skill sets that I was lucky enough to have, I'm like, oh, entertainment. People are like, oh, so you're just going to kind of talk to the group and they're going to be quiet. I'm like, it's fine. I can talk to a wall. We'll be okay. I'm just going to sit here and I'm going to entertain them. When they have questions, I'll tell them to come off. I'll field it. It'll be great. Not a problem. Like, we'll be all right. So
is
because
that acting,
they don't know, they're like,
that acting background.
Exactly. You're like, all right, if they're not going to give me something back, I'm just going to keep filling time and talking to them more about the drinks. Because sometimes, that's a bit of it too, is learning how to also then coax questions out of people. So, they have questions, but no one wants to ask stupid questions. You don't have to get to that point of like, there's no stupid questions. Let me just tell you something that seems super basic that you want to know about. So I'm going to kind of tell you about it. So you're not like, oh, okay.
Yeah, for sure. I can talk to a wall too, I think. I talk to myself all the time. I don't know if you do that.
I think it's very helpful. Like, absolutely. Sometimes why not? Like, go for a walk, talk to yourself. It's kind of the things that like unlock for you. There's actually a few, they kind of talk about, there's like a couple of these, like, I believe it was, I think it was an Israeli philosopher, someone who talks a lot about, and this happened at that reality experience, or like, getting comfortable talking to yourself is kind of a really good way of like, working things out. And I think especially right now, I think we all kind of need ways to just kind of decompress and find those outlets. So whether it's meditation for some people, whatever keeps you going. For me, it's keeping working, it's keeping doing whatever I can, whatever initiatives I can do, to keep this industry going. I've been working with a lot of philanthropic groups. So I'm a board member of a group called the Restaurant Workers Community Foundation, which we really took off during this time. We were just about 2 years old when quarantine happened. And the mission that we set up for how we were going to tackle like our buckets of things to tackle within the industry just lined up at a time that was really important. So we were able to fundraise and get dollars in hands of out of work hospitality workers, then go into, we're launching a zero interest loan program to help small businesses come back and invest in those, because we do believe there are places in our community that are important. especially for opportunities for lots of people to have a job. You know, it's one of the few careers that you can get into and really take a lot of training on the job. So just kind of try to find different ways to react and respond, you know, translating lots of different management resources into multiple languages so that we're not leaving anyone out of the conversation. So we've been doing a lot with that, and making sure that, you know, we have an equitable future as the hospitality industry. So that's been really important. And then with Speed Rack, we've been, you know, doing different events, raising money, making sure that, you know, during this time, we're not forgetting, you know, a lot of people who are having a hard time are still being diagnosed with breast cancer, and all these other issues have not gone away. So we've been working really hard to kind of keep some focus and light on those issues as well. And obviously just keeping growing diversity and inclusion within our hospitality industry, within our, you know, very small set of craft bartending, and making sure that that continues to grow, and that we can use our platform to raise up other groups who are in need of similar, where, you know, I think that very intersectional feminism that uses our platform to keep raising up, you know, other groups that really need support and need to kind of have the same kind of opportunities we created for ourselves. How do we keep creating that for others and bringing people along with you? So that's been a really important time.
It's so important. It's so incredibly important. So kudos to you and all of your pals who are doing this, because it's so incredibly important. We're lucky to have you in all these communities. For the mixologist wannabes at home, what's the common mistake they make? I think I have one answer, but are there several mistakes?
There's several mistakes. I think the biggest one is, I think, freshness, right, of ingredients, or just thinking about the ingredients is one. You know, like I said earlier, it's not that hard to get a lime, or if you're going to also get like the fresh lime juice, that's not really a fresh lime juice, learning how to use that ingredient. So balance, measuring. I mean, I think it's great to kind of free pour your drink, but learning balance, like any other recipe, you know, it's complicated. Like, get yourself a jigger or a good set of teaspoons. You know, every tablespoon is a half ounce. You can use your kitchen ingredients to build cocktails. Because I think, you know, you start with the whole like, oh, I'm just going to pour a little here, a little there, and then you're over adjusting. I think it's really important to understand the basics, and then you can play around, right? Then, you know, things you can mess around with are what kind of bitters you want to put in there. You know, also being inspired by just the things you like to cook, I think, are a really great place. You know, you have lots of things in your cabinet that you probably don't even think about using in a drink. Teas, there's, you know, you probably have that jar of honey that never goes bad that you could take and turn that into a sugar source. So if you want to make an old fashioned, you're like, I don't have any sugar. Oh no. And you're like, okay, well, I have honey. Just kind of playing that idea of like using what you have. And that will teach you balance. And I think that's why I stick with a measurement ingredient, because, you know, sweet sour is something really important to measure and understand that building block when you are making cocktails. So I kind of just have something to measure with, and it doesn't have to be ounces. You can do parts, you know, like, so if you don't have something that has markings, use, you know, anything that you're like, I'm gonna put 2 parts or 1 part of something. So that way you can just think in proportions, but you're still measuring in some way to keep your cocktail in balance.
So I was gonna say, if you're doing a mixed cocktail, not putting enough ice in the shaker. No? Yes?
You're just addressing dilution in general, right?
Right.
So diluting your cocktail is a part of balance, right? When to shake, when to stir. Do not shake your drinks that are supposed to be stirred. So just easy for you. If it has citrus, shake it. If it doesn't have citrus, don't shake it. Stir it. Simple rule.
That's great.
We could start there, and that's like a basic rule. And then you're right, like it's how much ice maybe, but also more so how you're diluting that ice. So if you have, you know, like I have large cubes, you know, that I keep in my fridge. So I have to use a little bit more of this ice to break it down. But if I was using kind of like the normal kind of half moon ice that you get in a normal ice tray, I don't have to put as much, but I do have to shake it nice and vigorously. So that way I get the water on to incorporate into the drink, because you're trying to basically incorporate all those ingredients of different weights and different, you know, volumes to come together into one cohesive drink.
Yeah, that's interesting, because it is dilution, right? Because I think a lot of people are like, oh, I don't want I'm not supposed to have water in there. It's not supposed to melt that much, but that actually is what helps balance, right?
Exactly.
Okay.
Like you've had like that drink, you put a little bit of ice, you go, and then you pour it over. It's not mixed at all. It needs to be mixed and mixed vigorously. It should be alive. Cocktails, live and change. So it should be very bright.
Okay. So were you going to make something for me virtually?
I am. So I'm gonna virtually make. So I just kind of right now I'm super inspired by the fact that it is citrus season in the U.S. So you're gonna get. Right now is your time. You're going to get the most beautiful Meyer lemons. Blood oranges will have a tiny season, so you'll get them all. So what I like to do is make my own lime cordial or lemon cordial or citrus cordial. So what I do is when I'm making my cocktails with the fresh juice, before I juice them, I just use like my normal vegetable peeler, take the peels off, and then I soak those into sugar and muddle them and let them kind of reduce down. And then I'll add a little bit of water and then actual lime juice. So I have like a kind of an what do you say, enriched lime juice, but it has sweetness in it already. But when you smell it too, it has the zest, and that zest has that beautiful aroma. And so for me, this is kind of a nice ingredient. So if we're talking about earlier, keeping fresh citrus or not, this can hang out in your fridge and give you citrus aromas. So once you make it, label it, it'll last for at least a month. And then you have a source. So I'm using this quite differently. So when I use my lime cordial, I use about ½ ounce of it in my drink, but I don't add extra sugar.
Right.
Because this has sugar, this has some citrus. And then I'll, if I have it, I'll throw a splash of fresh citrus juice as well. But what I'm going to make today is just a very simple kind of elevated tequila sour. So this is kind of like our version of margarita. So just a little ½ ounce of our lime cordial. Actually, I'm going to make it 3/4 because I'm not going to use fresh lime juice. I'm going to actually top it with tonic.
Oh. And
then I'm going to go ahead and add, it's early, so I go for when I want a lighter kind of tall highball drink, I do 1.5 ounces.
Okay.
So a normal margarita, I would do 2 ounces on the rocks. Because I'm going to make this a long drink in that highball style, I like to use 1.5 ounces. So it's going to be a little bit lighter on the tequila, but you'll have all the flavor.
This is the coolest thing ever. I'm just going to throw that. This is so cool.
Give that a nice shake. So I made it nice and alive. So that shake, as you just saw, bringing lots of flavor.
Yeah, wake it up. Don't put it to sleep.
Exactly. That's the best quote from Embry.
It's such a good quote.
It's a great quote. So I'm going to put some ice there. I'm going to strain this into the glass to kind of help. I'll follow that. You notice, so my glass is only about half full. I have to get the ice down a little bit, so the rest is going to be filled with and you can use soda or tonic. I'm using tonic because I like to have a little bit of that bitter quinine. But if you choose to use soda instead, you can add some bitters. So I have a grapefruit and hop bitters from Bittered Sling, so I'm gonna put a couple dashes in there. And this is gonna bring another. So now I'm thinking like Paloma, all those kind of flavors coming in, and then I'm going to use our tonic. And this tonic is a wild botanical tonic, so you can kind of go with something citrusy, go something a little bit more bright and fresh. I'm going to have to get this open real quick. Well, hold on a second there. 1 minute. This is when you don't get your mise en place set in the bar. Gotta have your mise en place fully set in the bar. I did think this one was a twist top. All right, so I'm putting my tonic in here, and then when I'm pouring my tonic or my soda, you could also sub ginger beer here if you want. Ooh. I just want to make sure I give it a nice stir to make sure that I'm mixing it, because you don't want to have all the, the layers, right? And this drink, I don't want layers. I want you to enjoy all the flavors and aromas together. So just mixing that together so you have some of those flavors. And then I'm going to go ahead and garnish that with a simple citrus twist on top, just to get that aroma and flavor. So I'm going to do that. They're super fragile little citrus. So I'm going to head and just do a little twist. And when you're doing the twist, you want the bumpy side towards your glass, and you just squeeze it, and there's oils, and that then invites the flavors and aromas. So this is just a nice, tall, refreshing highball with your citrus cordial. Play around, get Meyer lemons, get whatever's in your market. Buy the clementines, all those kind of things. You can turn anything into this basic cordial, citrus cordial, and then use it across different drinks.
I love it. I'm swooning right now. Swoon. I'm swooning. That was so much fun. And you're right, it is citrus season. So this is a great time to play around with mixing drinks, shaking up drinks, because you shake if it has citrus, is what I've just learned.
Absolutely, and that to me is just a simple way to bring in freshness.
Yeah. Do you have a fave? I want to wrap up a little bit. Do you have a fave booze? A favorite?
Oh, it's like choosing between lots of different amazing friends. Like, who's your bestie out of it? I know the most about rum, and I think you know I do appreciate rum. James Beard, the famous quote that he had about rum was that of all the liquors in your cabinet, rum is the most romantic. And so what I take from that is that, rum is about where it's from. It really does terroir. It's so diverse. You have grassy, tangy rums from like Jamaica, and rum agricoles are really bright and tangy. But then you have, aged rums that have been rested for a longer period of time that drink more like whiskey or cognac. So there's so much variety within that one category. So I know the most about it. I tend to use it. I really love enjoying mezcal as well. So if I'm sipping something, I'm a big fan of mezcal, and they're not all smoke bombs. So really when you get into what the different varieties of the agaves, and I think again it goes back to a theme. I'm interested in a product that has multiple expressions over many things. But my dive bar drink is a gin and soda with 2 limes. So well, I kind of go across. But
I love it. I just recently discovered in a local fantastic Mexican restaurant tajin on your rim for like a margarita with mezcal in it. Oh man, that's changed my life.
And it has a little citrusiness to it, so that's great. Like playing around with different salts. That's another thing you can do with your citrus right now. If you have the peel of something, I zest the peel off of it, and then I bake it with some kosher salt, and then I have a citrus salt. I just made one the other day with a citrus that was sent to me called etrog, which is a super fragrant lemon-like citrus that's used a lot in fragrances, and it's from Israel. And I was like, this is the coolest lemony thing I've ever seen. So I made an etrog salt, and then I took the rest of it, and it's infusing into some base spirit to make a tincture. So lots of different things to do.
Lynette, you're so cool. You're so cool.
I just really like what I do.
Yeah, I can
really
tell.
Lucky to,
oh my gosh,
like Peter Pan. You get your real job. If you get the job that you love, you never really have to grow up. You're just playing forever.
It's great. That's a beautiful philosophy. But yeah, I mean, you can absolutely 1000% tell you love what you do. Before we get to the final 3, you said you love to cook. I have to ask you, what's your favorite thing to cook in the kitchen? Because I love to cook myself.
I have to say during quarantine, it's been my mastering of all sorts, every soup, every kind of soup or stew. Like I said, it comes back from my mom taught me when I was growing up for sofrito, which is like our version of kind of like a flavor bomb.
Yeah.
And it's, I pull together all like cilantro, garlic, onion. I could throw that in, everything's magic. I've really started enjoying doing whole fish a lot too. So that idea of baking something and adding flavors. I mean, it's, again, food, my husband's like, I don't think you've repeated a meal this whole time. Like I've just changed them enough that you haven't noticed, because I won't just make the same. I'm not a recipe person when it comes to food. Yeah. I'm like sort of the opposite. I read a recipe and then I'm like, okay, I'm going to change it and make my own way. So I take some of that philosophy into drink making, but I'm like, but first learn the principles, learn the balance, that core recipe, and then add things to it. So
perfect. I did the same thing yesterday. I'm not a recipe person, but the recipe said 6 cloves of garlic or an onion. And I'm like, why would you ever or? It's always and.
Yeah, that's an and.
Always.
For sure.
Always.
That's always an and.
Okay. Lynette, let's get to the final 3. Best advice you've ever been given.
Be accountable. Do what you're gonna like. If you say you're gonna do it, follow through.
Okay, I like it. Do you know who gave you that? Did you give that to yourself?
No, I think it was just kind of like something I learned just
Mm-hmm.
along the line that, a few people have basically, they're like, you do what you say you're going to do. And I'm like, well, that is the best advice. Continue on that path and follow through.
Beautiful. What's your happy place?
My happy place is probably having a Negroni while I'm making dinner.
Yes.
Well, I'm getting ready in that moment because that's my thinking time, like looking through the fridge, what I'm going to do. And the Negroni is perfect. I've taught my husband to make it. It's equal parts. I'm like, all right,
Yep.
get the Negroni going. I'm going to put it in a big ice rock. It can sit while I'm kind of floating around. So
I'm a Boulevardier girl. Negroni.
perfect.
I love a
That
good
template
Boulevardier.
to me, yeah, the template for that's part of the Negroni family tree, which is another topic, but perfect drink. Yeah.
And Campari. Oh, Campari is just so delicious. Okay, we could talk about booze, I think, forever. If you were given a final meal and a final drink, what would that look like?
Oh, it's probably a baller omakase sushi.
Hold on,
So
we've got,
for sure.
this happens a lot. Okay, hold on. Yeah, we're low battery on this end, but we're good. We're good to go.
Got it. So a beautiful omakase sushi experience where like I can taste the cut that the chef has picked is melting in my mouth. And I'm going to have with that probably a perfect 50-50 martini with an olive and a twist.
Okay, very specific. You're my kind of woman. I like that. If you liked this demonstration that Lynette just gave to us, you can find out more with her masterclass. You can find that online. You can also watch this podcast at ktbl.com and on YouTube. Just search Off Script with Trish Close, and you can listen to it wherever you like to listen to podcasts. One more time, Lynette Marrero, award-winning bartender, mixologist, and philanthropist. You've taught me so much. You're just a super cool chick, and I'm just so glad you exist in this world.
Oh, thank you. This has been great. Thanks for taking time to chat about so many things that I haven't thought about in a while. So
Oh, cool.
cheers and have a great day.
Yeah, cheers to you for sure.